Order, please. Before we begin the daily routine, the honourable member for Chester St. Margaret's on introduction.
Mr. Speaker, I very much appreciate this opportunity to welcome the grade 5 and 6 from East St. Margaret's School, as well the teacher, Leslie Stevens, Marcia Mosier, Karen Fader, Gail Morash, Annette Boutlier, and Jackie Murray are either as teachers or attendants. And I think the House was very, very thrilled that these were not the people that were just yelling outside the House. So I'd like you all just to stand up and we'll give you a warm welcome.
Certainly welcome to our special guests to the gallery today. We see all they have their name tags on, and that's great for the members to identify them, and we hope you enjoy the proceedings today. Before we begin the day routine, the subject for this evening's late debate was submitted by the honourable member for Cape Breton West. Therefore, be resolved, an insurance freeze does not address the issue of high insurance rates. It is merely a pre-election band-aid. Be debated this evening at 6 p.m. Begin the day routine, presenting and reading petitions. The honourable member for Dartmouth North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I table a petition with 35 signatures on it, and the operative clause reads, "We, the undersigned family members, councillors, and other concerned persons call on the Ham government to show that it cares about the residents of Regional Residential Services Society by giving that agency a mandating the appropriate funding to negotiate wage parity for the residential councillors as soon as possible." Mr. Speaker, I have affixed my signature to the petition.
Petition is tabled. Presenting reports of committees. Table reports, regulations, and other papers. The Honourable Deputy Premier.
Speaker, I beg leave to table the report of the Superintendent of Pensions on the administration of the Pension Benefits Act for the year ending March 31, 2002.
Order is tabled. The Honourable Deputy Premier.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it's my pleasure to table the draft regulations that should accompany the Firefighters Compensation Act.
The regulations are tabled. Statements by ministers. Government notice of motion. The Honourable Minister of Tourism and Culture.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I do this on behalf of the Minister responsible for Aboriginal Affairs, the member from Lunenburg. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Sister Dorothy Moore will receive the prestigious Elizabeth Fry Society's Rebel with a Cause Award on Friday, May 9th. And where she has dedicated her life to the education of Mi'kmaq youth, particularly in the areas of language and culture. And where Sister Moore has served on numerous boards and committees dealing with Aboriginal issues and is currently education consultant to member to First Nations Education, the Nova Scotia Human Rights Commission, and the Atlantic Aboriginal Health Research Program. Therefore, be it resolved that this House of Assembly congratulates Sister Dorothy Moore for her selection as recipient of this prestigious award and her lifetime of exemplary work in the field of education. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Question for waivers, it agreed. All those in favour say aye. Counterminded nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Education.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the provincial government and its partners have put 6,200 new computers and internet access in schools and will add 3,600 more through our Learning for Life strategy by 2004. And whereas I had the opportunity to visit St. Andrew Junior School in Antigonish yesterday, where grade 5 students are improving their reading and writing skills by using this technology to do a modern version of the book report and to produce a class newsletter. And whereas the teachers are finding many innovative ways to motivate our students with technology in the classroom, therefore be it resolved that all members of this House acknowledge the achievements of our teachers and students during National Information Technology Week from May 3rd to 11th. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver and passage without debate.
Request for waivers, it agreed. All those in favour say aye. Counterminded nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Environment and Labour.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move adoption of the following resolution. Whereas May 4th to 10th is North American Occupational Safety and Health Week, a time to increase awareness of the benefits of investing in occupational safety and health, and whereas this year's theme is Prevention is the Cure, Prepare Young Workers for the Future, and whereas it is the goal of the Department to increase awareness among all workplace parties of the province's occupational health and safety regulations and responsibilities, therefore be it resolved that we celebrate North American Occupational Safe and Health Week by each making a renewed commitment to workplace health and safety and by acknowledging the role we can each fulfill in making our province the safest and healthiest place in the world to live, work, and play. And, Mr. Speaker, I request waiver and passage without debate.
Request for waivers is agreed. All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. Introduction of bills. Notice of motion. The honourable member for Dartmouth North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas on May the 1st, 2003, John McNeill Elementary School hosted the Canadian Citizenship Court, and whereas the Principal, William Burchell, Vice Principal Charlie Martin, the staff and the students created a welcoming environment by displaying maps and flags of the countries of origin of our new Canadian citizens. And whereas 43 immigrants from 22 different countries took the oath of citizenship and will now call Canada their homeland. Therefore, be it resolved that this Legislative Assembly congratulate John McNeill Elementary School and all those involved in hosting the Canadian Citizenship Court on May the 1st and welcome our new Canadians with the best wishes for success in their future endeavors. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver and passage without debate.
Request for waivers is agreed. All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. The motion is carried. The honourable member for Cape Breton South.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice, and on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas on May 31st, 2003, New Waterford's Leo Fahey, Sydney Stan McDougall, Westmount's Roe Rutherham, and North Sydney's Cyril McDonald will be inducted to the Cape Breton Heritage Hall of Fame. Whereas the 1964-65 Cape Breton Post Bombers, along with the Cape Glace Bay Antonians, who won the 1952 Maritime Junior Baseball Championships, will be honored for their contribution to the record books. And whereas in recognition of the efforts made by Dr. Carl Bucky Buchanan, former UCCB Athletics Director, and Port Hood's Bobby Beaton, former boxer and referee, to build a strong base in athletics throughout Cape Breton Island, Dr. Buchanan and Mr. Beaton will also be inducted on May 31st, 2003. Therefore, be it resolved, the members of this legislature recognize the contributions these individuals have made to sports in Cape Breton Island and congratulate each of them for being inducted in the Cape Breton Heritage Hall of Fame. And I would ask for waiver, Mr. Speaker.
Request for waivers is agreed. All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Kings North.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Nova Scotia turkey industry represents 24 producers supplying 4.5 million kilograms of product, valued at $6.6 billion to a Nova Scotia economy, and whereas the Agriculture Chair for the World Trade Organization, Stuart Harbison, recently prepared a fundamentally flawed paper which has been announced by the Canadian Federation of Agriculture, as well as what is known in agriculture circles as the SM5 group, and whereas the Legislature's Resource Committee unanimously passed a motion this morning requesting our Minister of Agriculture to send a letter to the Federal Minister of Agriculture calling upon the federal government to oppose the Harbison report. Therefore, be it resolved that all MLAs in this legislature support the Minister and the Nova Scotia Turkey Marketing Board in their opposition to the Harbison report. I request waiver.
Request for waivers is agreed. All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable leader of the official opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I will move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the consternation of Nova Scotians grows each day with this government's failure to address skyrocketing auto insurance premiums adequately or to control tuition rate increases that make education less and less accessible. And whereas yesterday this government announced that after rate increases of 65% or more, they will freeze auto insurance rates until 2004, which is the equivalent of a doctor putting a Band-Aid on a bullet wound. And whereas one furious Nova Scotian wrote to the NDP that between car insurance and tuition fees, I'll be paying through the nose until I'm dead. Therefore, be it resolved that government should act to help today's families by implementing the fairest and lowest auto insurance rates and freezing tuition fees for students. I request waiver, Mr. Speaker.
For waiver, here no. Notice is tabled. The honourable member for Cape Breton West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas representatives from the Nova Scotia Turkey Marketing Board appeared before the Resources Committee of the Legislature today, whereas these representatives advised members of the committee that the Tory government has failed on its Blue Book commitment to buy Nova Scotia first as it relates to their industry, and whereas these representatives also advised members of the committee that they now face higher user fees, additional new user fees, and more red tape than 6 years ago. Therefore, be it resolved that Premier Ham admit that his Tory Blue Book promise to buy Nova Scotia first is just another broken promise to our agricultural community. Mr. Speaker, I would ask for a waiver of notice.
Waiver. Here's several noes. Notice is tabled. The honourable member for Annapolis.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Annapolis Valley Regional School Board Non-Union Employees Recognition of Service Awards reception has recently taken place in Berwick, honoring long-term service of non-support staff, and whereas Gail Ruggles of Middleton Regional High School received one of these recognition awards for her service to the school spanning 20 years, and whereas Judy Menard of the Bridgetown Regional High School also was the recipient of an award for her 10-year service at BRHS. Therefore, be resolved that all members of this House congratulate Gail Ruggles and Judy Menard on receiving the Annapolis Valley Regional School Board Non-Union Employees Recognition of Service Awards for their commitment to Middleton Regional High School and Bridgetown Regional High School, respectively, and wish them success in their future endeavors. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice.
Request for waivers. Is it agreed? All those in favour say aye. Counterminded nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Halifax Needham.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Feminists for a Just and Equitable Public Policy is a coalition of equity-seeking community-based organizations helping to shape public policy. And whereas this coalition works to put women's issues on the agendas of all political parties in Nova Scotia. And whereas on Thursday, May the 8th, the Feminists for Just and Equitable Public Policy will release to all political parties a document outlining 16 key areas of concern to women and their families. Therefore, be it resolved that the members of the House congratulate Feminists for Just and Equitable Public Policy for their effort on behalf of all women and commit to ensuring their public policy recommendations are given thorough consideration when election platforms are prepared. Mr. Speaker, I seek waiver and passage without debate.
Is it agreed? Here no. Notice is tabled. The honourable member for Glace Bay on an introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, joining us this afternoon in the West Gallery, a group of concerned parents from Yarmouth who are here today hoping to obtain a meeting on that subject matter of resources for French immersion programs in their area, Mr. Speaker. And I'd like the House to welcome, please, Wendy Robichaud, Dr. Michelle Kane, Joan Brewer, Paula Goody, Audrey Vaughn, and Marilyn Webster. And if the members would please show their kind welcome to the House today for these parents.
Welcome our guests to the gallery today. Hope they enjoy the proceedings. The honourable member for Victoria.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the praise singers from St. Anne's have been entertaining an audience across Cape Breton for 25 years under the direction of Heather McGuinness, and whereas the Celtic Men's Chorus from Industrial Cape Breton have been making music through song for 52 years under the leadership of Weston McQueen, and whereas these two groups combine their talents on a special evening of music on Sunday, May 4th, in the St. Anne's Bay United Church. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this Assembly applaud the efforts of Heather McGuinness and Weston McQueen and all the members of the two groups for their tireless efforts in maintaining the fine level of music and song to our province. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver and passage without debate.
Much for waivers, it agreed. All those in favour say aye. Contrary-minded nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Pictou East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas in 1746, on a Scottish moor called Culloden Field, a battle was fought and lost, determining the fate of those who would bring the Scottish character to what would be called New Scotland. And whereas defeated in war, Scottish families left their country of peace in the New World, landing on the north shores of the province of Nova Scotia. And whereas cherishing their Scottish heritage in memory of the battle which brought so many Scottish people to our shores, more than 200 people gathered again this year in the community of Lismore to the cairn where 3 who fought at the Culloden are buried. Therefore, be it resolved, all members of the House consider the tremendous part these Scottish immigrants played in our province's history and the character they have added to the province's rich and diverse culture, and I ask for a waiver.
Request for waivers, is agreed? All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Hants East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas May 4th to May 10th has been named National Forest Week in Canada, and whereas our forests are a source of life and to sustain them is to sustain our lives, and whereas this week gives us and all Canadians a chance to think about and appreciate the rich national heritage and wealth of our vast but diminishing forests. Therefore, be resolved that this House celebrate this week as National Forest Week and commit to implementing the Canadian Forest Association's motto, enjoying the national treasures of our forests today while protecting forest health for the future. And I request waiver notice and passage without debate.
For waivers, is agreed? All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Cape Breton Nova.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the PC-NDP alliance has grown to where when the NDP say jump, the PCs meekly respond, how high? And whereas it is reliably reported that leading Tories are now spending their evenings memorizing clauses of the Regina Manifesto. And whereas we further learn that a team of NDP ghostwriters have been retained to compose the contents of Blue Book 2. Resolved that the partners in the PC-NDP alliance should fuse so that by fusion in action, the voters can then choose between the PC-NDP party on the one hand and the Liberal Party on the other hand come election day.
Notice is tabled. The honourable member for Kings North.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the digital divide is expanding between underdeveloped and developed countries, and whereas CUSO, with financial support from the Kentville and Wolfville Rotary Clubs, is assisting in helping this technology gap from widening, and whereas Kentville IT specialist Jennifer McLeod has recently completed a 6-month contract with CUSO, where she designed a database, user interface, and website for the McCann Centre in Jamaica to aid in the identification of childhood disabilities. Therefore, be it resolved that the members of this House join me in expressing our gratitude to Jennifer McLeod, CUSO, and the Kentville and Wolfville Rotary Clubs for their efforts to diminish the digital divide. I request waiver.
Request for waivers, is agreed? All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Dartmouth North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Group Home Councillors with Regional Residential Services Society continues to seek a fair wage agreement through the Minister of Community Services, but it's clear the Premier has reined in his minister. And whereas, although the Minister has stated that these workers are being paid what they are worth, his Premier steadfastly refuses to meet the workers' reasonable request that their demand go to arbitration. And whereas this Premier jumped quickly to arbitrate disputes with the casinos and with the Armenians over the P3 school contracts, therefore be it resolved that the Premier treat the request for arbitration by Group Home Councillors with the Regional Residential Services Society with the same reverence and dispatch that he gave to the arbitrated settlements with the casino and the P3 schools contracts. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver and passage without debate.
Mr. Waiver, here no. Notice is tabled. The honourable member for Richmond.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas on Friday, June 4, 1999, the leader of the third party, John Ham, stated the following, quote, "What we have before us and what we are dealing with in the Committee on Estimates is a government that came to power realizing as I did when I ran in 1993, that we have to start living within our means, and if we don't, catastrophic things are going to happen down the road, end quote. Whereas as the debt continues to grow, it is clear that the Premier has abandoned his raison d'etre for entering politics in the first place. Whereas after $1 billion in extra revenue and $500 million in extra borrowing, it is even more apparent that the Premier has abandoned his belief that we have to start living within our means. Therefore, be it resolved that the members of this House recognise that the Premier seems satisfied with his reckless spending and borrowing, which will result in catastrophic things happening down the road.
Notice is tabled. The honourable member for Halifax, Bedford Basin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the mandate of the Fulbright Chair at the Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars is to identify the best scholars and to engage them in exchanges consistent with the highest standards. Whereas Mount St. Vincent University Professor Reginald Stewart is the only scholar from a maritime university to win this 2-year-old award. And whereas this respected specialist in Canada-U.S. relations will act as visiting 5-month chair at the Centre's Canada Institute. Therefore, be it resolved, the members of this House join me in expressing our congratulations to Professor Reginald Stewart on winning the Fulbright Award and wish him much success in his future endeavours. Mr. Speaker, I seek waiver.
Request for waiver is agreed. All those in favour say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. Honourable member Cape Breton Centre.
Why, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice in the future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas more and more Nova Scotians are adopting the motto of the NDP Task Force on Lower Auto Insurance Rate, that Nova Scotia drivers deserve a fairer deal. And whereas they keep telling us that rates are unfair, that government needs to take meaningful action, and they deserve the lowest and fairest insurance rates. And whereas one disgruntled Nova Scotian has a great suggestion, every year, Saskatoon registers license and insurance through one body. We could do the same. Therefore, be it resolved that if this government intends to vault the next election hurdle, it must do more than make a half-hearted attempt to stop the bleeding of drivers' wallets through a half-baked, half-year freeze on auto insurance rates. I seek waiver, Mr. Speaker.
Request for waiver. Here or no. Notice is tabled. The honourable member for Cape Breton Nova.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas since the last resolution on this topic, the PCs and NDPs have now grown so enmeshed that whichever way you vote, you get the other. And whereas whatever the NDP has said, the Tories have done, so much so that this has become the chief NDP sales pitch. And whereas the Tories plan to stay in power by conceding to the NDP those Metro Halifax ridings they cannot win themselves, thereby hoping to divide and conquer, as Julius Caesar wrote. Resolved, the Nova Scotian political history since 1998 demonstrates that the chief fixation of the NDP over that time has been either to put or to keep the Tory party in power.
Notice is tabled. The honourable member for Queens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the MLA for Dartmouth East, a native of Queens County, has announced he will not re-offer in the next election, and whereas because of those ties the member has a summer home in Bells Point in the suburbs of Port Mattoon, Queens County, and whereas while we will miss the honourable member from Dartmouth East in this House, as the sitting member, I will be honoured to ensure that his needs as a resident of Queens County continue to be cared for in his retirement if he chooses to spend more time in such a beautiful part of the province. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House wish the honourable member and his wife Linda all the best in their future plans after being dedicated to the constituency of Dartmouth East for almost 2 decades, and encourage him to enjoy many happy days in Queens County, watching the lobster boats on the bay. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice.
Request for waivers. Is it agreed? All those in favour say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member Timberley Prospect.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll be asking for waiver and passage without debate. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Sir John A. Macdonald High School teacher Amber McFadden has been selected for the Kaisei Koho Fellowship to study in Japan from June 29th to July 12th. Whereas Ms. McFadden was the only Canadian chosen for this prestigious opportunity. Whereas Amber McFadden has demonstrated exemplary leadership in Nova Scotia's school system, therefore be it resolved that this House of Assembly congratulate Amber McFadden of Sir John A. Macdonald High School on her selection as a Keisa Koho Fellow with wishes for a great learning experience in Japan. I ask for waiver and passage without debate, Mr. Speaker.
Is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Richmond.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas in 1998, the Ham Tories ran on a platform of putting people first, in which the Tory leader would transform himself into the next Robert Stanfield. And whereas in 1999, the Ham Tories ran on a platform of strong leadership and a clear course, in which the Tory leader hoped to emulate the tough-talking Donnie Cameron. Whereas this year, the government is getting $1 billion more in revenue than the government of 1999, have added $500 million more to the debt, and have made over $700 million in pre-election promises. Therefore, be it resolved that the current government might want to consider this slogan for the 2003 campaign: $100 million here, $100 million there, and pretty soon you're talking about real money. In this way, the Premier can emulate another infamous Tory Premier. And Mr. Speaker, I'd ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Waiver here, no. Notice is tabled. The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas an important part of student school year involves the Spring Science Fair, and whereas Ellen Whitman and Marita Winslade, grade 8 French immersion students at Wolfville School, were provincial winners with their projects Mot de Guerre, Mot de Paix, and Neige Acide, respectively. And whereas Ellen and Marita will be 2 of the 5 Annapolis Valley students representing Nova Scotia at the 2003 Canada-wide Science Fair in Calgary, May the 11th to 18th. Therefore, be it resolved that this House applaud not only Ellen and Marita, but all students who participate in the annual spring science fairs. And Mr. Speaker, I request waiver.
Waiver, is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Cape Breton West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the RRSS strike is a loss or a lose-lose situation for all stakeholders involved. And whereas yesterday, healthcare providers attending Province House were advised by the member for Kings North that binding arbitration was not possible for them because they were not considered, quote, essential service workers. And whereas such statements indicate a complete lack of knowledge of the Trade Union Act, therefore be it resolved that the member for Kings North be reminded of the adage that it is better to be thought of old than to open one mouth and remove all doubt.
Order, please. Order, please. I'll review that resolution before it's allowed to be entered. The honourable member for Cape Breton Centre on introduction.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the East Gallery today, Mr. Speaker, you'll see a cameraman up there with a white jersey on, and his name is George Reeves, and I'd like the House to congratulate George on this past weekend. George won an Atlantic Journalism Award in photojournalism category, so if I'll just give George congratulations for.
Certainly welcome George to the gallery today. Congratulations, George, on behalf of all the members. The resolution introduced by the honourable member Cape Breton West is, in my opinion, unparliamentary and out of order. The honourable member Timberley Prospect.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Festival of Knowledge, the first annual athletic event for the intellect, was held on Saturday, May 3rd in Bridgewater. Whereas the main topic among many of the activities was what makes a healthy community. Whereas a Community Action Award was presented to Brookside Junior High School of Hatchet Lake, whose students created a community that integrated the elderly, reduced energy use, and allowed residents to earn community credits through charity work. Therefore, be it resolved that this Nova Scotia Legislature congratulate Brookside Junior High and its students and all schools that participated in the first annual Festival of Knowledge. I ask for waiver and passage without debate, Mr. Speaker.
Is it agreed? All those in favour say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. Orders of the day or questions put by members. Question period will begin at 12:35 and at 1:35, the Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. My question is for the minister responsible for skyrocketing insurance premiums. The government will delay the latest round of general rate increases, but it is a fact that despite the minister's actions yesterday, companies can continue to charge Nova Scotians more for auto insurance. Companies can shift people into facility associations. They can shift more people into less favorable rate categories. They can raise deductibles. They can deny customer discounts. And, Mr. Speaker, the list of ways that they can hike rates for people is almost endless. So my question to the minister is this. Were you even aware that the rate freeze you crafted is no barrier to insurance companies that want to keep hiking the rates paid by Nova Scotians?
The Honourable Minister of Environment and Labour.
Speaker, responding to the whining, whinging leader of the opposition, Speaker, if he is indicating to the public and in this House, to the members of this House, that the insurance companies can do as they will, then he is incorrect.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on your first supplementary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the minister has a long history of being incorrect in this province, and we are constantly forced to remind people of his inability to handle this portfolio. It is the case, Mr. Speaker, that after decades of practice, the insurance industry is adept at avoiding government regulation. The minister has delayed the latest rate increases, but his plan has countless loopholes. Any insurance company that wants to hike people's rates has plenty of options. Mr. Speaker, every one of those options is going to cost people of this province more. My question to the minister responsible for the skyrocketing insurance rates is this: why did you create the impression that drivers will not see higher insurance bills when the opposite is true?
The Honourable Minister of Environment and Labour.
Mr. Speaker, the opposite is not true, and we have ample power within the bill to enact regulations as we see fit.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, the Premier said yesterday that he thought he could rely on the insurance industry to await the UARB findings before changing their rates. Well, he was wrong. Now the government thinks it has frozen what Nova Scotians will pay. Again, he's wrong. Volunteer fire departments, families, and small businesses will find this as their insurance comes up for renewal, and that they are also going to be paying all the higher rates that were set before April 30th. My question to the minister responsible for skyrocketing insurance is, why have you failed so miserably to lower insurance rates in this province?
The Honourable Minister of Environment and Labour.
Just again to the whining, whinging leader of the New Democratic Party. I am.
Order, please. Order, please. The Honourable Minister of Environment and Labour.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I can advise the honourable member that we are taking action. We're taking action in response to the industry's actions, and we will continue to do so.
The honourable member for Dartmouth East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question to the Premier. Yesterday we learned of the health and safety of the residents of Orangedale are at very significant risk. High levels of aluminum and in the water supply leave residents at risk for Alzheimer's, Parkinsonism, Lou Gehrig's disease, not to mention the side effects for bone and cardiac disease. My question to the Premier, could he confirm whether that he has kept on top of the issue by speaking to his colleagues, the Minister of Health and the Minister of Service from Nova Scotia Municipal Relations, about the high risks and high levels of aluminum in a water supply?
The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I can relate to the minister, to the member opposite, that in fact, on a previous occasion, I had met in Orangedale with the people of Orangedale who were concerned about their water supply, and noted with interest that they are again making public their concerns. And we in government are prepared to dialogue with them in terms of any medical concerns they might have with their water supply.
The Honourable Member for Dartmouth East on your first supplementary.
Speaker, and my question next to the Minister of Service, Nova Scotia Municipal Relations. And Mr. Speaker, yesterday the 7 board members and 3 executive members of the Orangedale Water Society resigned effective June the 16th this year. They did so because they can't afford the liability insurance and they're afraid of the health risks associated with the drinking water. And that's a real risk, Mr. Speaker. We only have to see what happened in charges being laid recently against employees and as a result of the Walkerton disaster in Ontario to know that these fears of the board are real. These are real fears. My question to the minister, given the board of directors have given this government until June the 16th, will this minister play a leadership role by sitting down with his federal and municipal counterparts to address this very serious issue through the Canada-Nova Scotia Infrastructure Program?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and to the honourable member.
Municipal Relations.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and to the honourable member, yes, we will, but I would offer the opportunity for my colleague from Environment to clarify some issues with that matter.
The Honourable Member. Order, please. The Honourable Member for Dartmouth East on your final supplementary.
Sorry, Mr. Speaker. I didn't mean to dismiss the minister, and there's another issue. There's an issue of governance here and an issue of responsibility of who, in fact, is responsible. But I've already gone to the Premier, then to the minister, and I'd like to stick with the one minister if possible. And I don't need to remind this minister, there's a provincial government that's responsible for standards of drinking water. And the province has provided support on 3 previous occasions. And in fact, a third of the users of this water supply are from facilities that are funded by the government, as the Minister of the past Minister of Community Services would well know. That's seniors, L'Arche, and the summer camp that's on the auspices of Community Services. So there's real risk in this area to seniors, adults, and children particularly. What assistance is the minister willing to provide in order to protect the health and well-being of Orangedale residents by providing a safe water supply after June the 16th?
The Honourable Minister of Service, Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and to the honourable member, we have had meetings with that group. They have had, as you know, with the safe water supply, we have indicated to them that we are prepared to share in water studies. But in that particular case, those people have some challenges, and indeed, we look forward to their application coming forward to infrastructure to make that work.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, auto insurance rates have jumped by 65% in the last year. Yesterday, the government announced that they will now delay rate increases until the beginning of next year. Calls are pouring into our office, Mr. Speaker, this morning. People are angry because this delay will not lower the sky-high rates they are already facing or improve fairness in any way. Drivers like Helen Davidson will be out of luck. Helen says her car is the only luxury she has and that it gives her freedom. But now her insurance rates have jumped by 60% in the last year and she may have to give up her car. Helen has 1 month to figure out how she can afford the increased rates. So my question to the minister responsible for those ever-increasing auto insurance premiums is, how are you going to help people already suffering from the skyrocketing insurance rates?
Honourable Minister of Environment, Labour.
Mr. Speaker, we have a plan. Our plan is progressing, and yesterday you saw the next element in our plan. Thank you.
Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on your first supplementary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, delaying the latest round of insurance increases is far from a solution. It will not address last year's 65% increase in auto insurance rates or prevent insurance companies from discriminating and gouging drivers. Christine Poirier is a single mother on a fixed income. After one car broke down, she recently got another fixer-upper to get by on. Now she's been told that when her 20-year-old is fully licensed, he will be listed as a primary driver on that vehicle in spite of her arguments that this won't be the case. Christine says that she has to stop her son from getting his license because she can't afford a $3,000 jump in her rate. My question for the minister responsible for skyrocketing insurance rates is this: why won't you stop insurance companies from gouging Nova Scotia families?
The Honourable Minister of Environment and Labour.
Mr. Speaker, where insurance companies are gouging their customers, then indeed the superintendent of insurance should be advised and appropriate action will be taken.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on your final supplementary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the reality is that half measures in this regard just won't cut it. Yesterday's delay in rates shows that the minister could have prevented last year's 65% rate increase, but government chose not to. It shows that only negative press in the lead up to an election can push this government to act. So I want to ask the minister responsible for skyrocketing insurance rates, why won't you give Nova Scotians a real break on auto insurance by making rates lower and fair in this province?
Honourable Minister of the Environment and Labour.
Mr. Speaker, the most desirable outcome at the end of our plan will be lower insurance rates for drivers in Nova Scotia.
The Honourable Member for Clare.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my question's for the Minister responsible for insurance as well. Mr. Speaker, this government came out yesterday with a partial plan to address auto insurance rates, but many seniors living in the province must cut corners to pay for their insurance. While the government's late process continues, the result is that the rates increased last year is leaving many seniors forced to pay higher rates. In fact, Mr. Speaker, I met with a senior on the weekend living in Metegan Centre who has limited savings, living on a fixed income, but who has to pay $900 more this year for insurance on his truck. My question to the minister: can the minister tell the seniors in this province what the proposed underwriting solutions are that they can expect from this government?
Honourable Minister of the Environment and Labour.
Well, it's nice to get a question on insurance from the Liberal Party, Mr. Speaker. At least they call me by my title. Mr. Speaker, I can advise the honourable members that seniors are very much in my mind.
Honourable Member for Clare on your first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, yesterday we heard from this government that more legislative changes for insurance will be introduced during the legislature's fall sitting. But with an election expected shortly, the help that many Nova Scotians want won't come until later this year. Mr. Speaker, Nova Scotians can't wait longer. They need solutions now. And my question to the minister: what explanation can this government and this minister give for not being prepared to help Nova Scotians with further solutions before they call an election?
The Honourable Minister of Environment and Labour.
I thank the honourable member for that question, Mr. Speaker. Yes, indeed, it is preferable that we can move on this subject before the next election. I don't know when the next election is going to be. I assume that the leader of the third party assumes that it's going to be very shortly. But, Mr. Speaker, within the next 3 or 4 weeks, we'll have concluded, and Mr. Jordan will have concluded his public consult, and I would expect, Mr. Speaker, I'll be making an an interim report to the House sometime shortly after that. If the House is still in session, if it is not, well, then I'll be delighted to make sure that the leader of the third party is on my mailing list.
Member for Clare on your final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, today Nova Scotians woke up to hear that the Conservative government introduced a small legislative measure to address the rising insurance rate, but Nova Scotians still want the details. Mr. Speaker, public transportation is not available in most rural areas, so people are forced to make choices, pay higher premiums, sell their cars, or drive without insurance. This government has known about this issue for over a year now, but only now, before an election, do they decide to bring forward legislation that doesn't completely address this issue. And my final question to the Minister is, since you have known about the insurance issue for over a year, can the Minister explain why it is only now that this government is deciding to act in dealing with rising auto insurance rates?
The Honourable Minister of Environment and Labour.
Speaker, I can advise the honourable member that 1 year ago we did move on this. We moved to the URB to ask them to investigate the increases in insurance rates. And Mr. Speaker, if I remember correctly, I think at that time the Liberal opposition were most positive in the fact that we should proceed to the URB, and we did that. Now, admittedly, the response from the URB is long overdue, but we do expect to get it, Mr. Speaker, in the next few days. Thank you.
The honourable member for Cape Breton Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my office has just recently learned that the number of people driving without automobile insurance is on the rise yet again. More than 2,700 were convicted for driving without insurance between April 1, 2002 and March 31, 2003. That's a 40% increase in just 5 short years, Mr. Speaker. The reality is that thousands of people are being forced to drive without insurance because they cannot afford the skyrocketing rates. I want to ask the minister responsible for skyrocketing insurance, why did you allow a 65% increase before you did anything at all?
The Honourable Minister of Environment and Labour.
Speaker, the facts that the honourable member is reeling off there are not exactly correct. First of all, the figure that is being used by the Leader of the Opposition, as well as the honourable member for Cape Breton Centre, of a 65% increase is certainly true in some cases. But however, Mr. Speaker, is not an across-the-board increase of 65%. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, the honourable member is talking about the number of drivers who have been apprehended driving without coverage. Mr. Speaker, the number is up this year. It was up again. It was also up last year, and then it was off for a couple of years. But, Mr. Speaker, if you look at the history of the number of people who are arrested for, or at least charged with driving without proper insurance, Mr. Speaker, the numbers are not substantially different over the years.
Now, Member Cape Breton Centre on your first supplementary.
47% in 5 years aren't substantial. Well, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to know, Mr. Speaker, you were a peace officer in your former life. If you saw crime raised like that, I would say that's substantial. Speaker, the facts are clear. The numbers for convicted of driving without insurance is climbing, and it's climbing at a horrendous rate, Mr. Minister. There are even more people driving without insurance on the road because of these skyrocketing costs. Take, for example, a gentleman that a father of three, Mr. Speaker. He recently had just missed one payment on his insurance and then had his car totaled by someone going through a red light and simply can't afford his insurance anymore, so he's now driving without insurance, Mr. Speaker. So, Minister, your freeze will do nothing to help the thousands of people now driving without auto insurance because of these skyrocketing rates. What's your plan to help these people?
Honourable Minister of Environment and Labour.
Speaker, I would not advise anyone to drive without the proper insurance.
Honourable Member Cape Breton Centre on your final supplementary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, that's the glib answers we've come to expect from this minister about the insurance, the minister for skyrocketing insurance and delay of doing anything, Mr. Speaker. We asked a simple question of how we can bring these costs to be fairer and cheaper for these people. You know, Mr. Speaker, an American watchdog, consumer watchdog group says 75% of the people who drive without auto insurance do so not because they're criminals, but because they can't afford it. Mr. Speaker, this province is turning law-abiding citizens into criminals because they will not react to the insurance gouging in this province, Mr. Speaker. So I want to ask this minister a very direct question. When are you going to provide Nova Scotians with some real solutions and give them the lower and fairer auto insurance that they should deserve in this province?
Yeah. Now, Minister of Environment and Labour.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm going to advise the honourable member to stay tuned because I've already told him that we will have an interim report in the very near future. It's quite possible and probable that we'll be reacting to that interim report by perhaps regulation or some other remedy. But, Mr. Speaker, there will be changes. Nova Scotians will have fair insurance. Nova Scotians will be able to drive. Mr. Speaker, Nova Scotians will be able to drive with adequate coverage.
Now, member for Halifax, Shabakto.
Thank you very much. Mr. Speaker, I have a question for the Minister of Natural Resources. The Minister yesterday announced an extension for the time of making claims following this winter's flood damage. Now, that event demonstrated yet again how real the impact of global climate change is for Nova Scotia coastal property owners. Environment Canada has sponsored a detailed study of the coastal impacts of climate change and sea level rise on Prince Edward Island, and there are other studies going on for all of Atlantic Canada. The results for PEI show potential for millions of dollars damage to land and infrastructure, and of course, there's no reason to think Nova Scotia is any differently positioned. I wonder, Mr. Speaker, if this minister can tell this House what active steps his department is taking to protect coastal properties and infrastructure from damage due to storm surges and sea level rise.
Good question.
The Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the honourable member for the question. Mr. Speaker, yesterday I was very pleased to stand in my place and just confirm to the people of Nova Scotia, the residents of Nova Scotia, who suffered hardship as a result of the disaster on March 31st, that in fact the province and the government is listening. We have extended it by the deadline for application by 2 weeks, and that is in keeping with the policy of making sure that Nova Scotians are looked after in a time of need by this government. Thank you very much.
Now, member Halifax Shabakto on your first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think I was asking about prevention, not about subsequent compensation. I would like to turn to the Minister of Municipal Affairs. One of the main steps that can be taken is to recognize areas that are in floodplains and to protect them or avoid the risk. The Truro area, we know, is especially vulnerable. West Main Street in Kentville was also hit recently, but these are only examples of a widespread vulnerability. There are, in fact, provincial guidelines in place about floodplains, but they don't seem to be very effective. I wonder if the Minister of Municipal Affairs will tell this House whether he is stepping in to require land uses that will avoid damage to housing and infrastructure from storm surges and sea level rise.
The Honourable Minister of Service, Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank the member for the question. It's something that has, as the member knows, has been discussed for some period of time, and there's a lot of ramifications with those floodplain areas. I did have an opportunity to speak with the president of the UNSM and raise those concerns that we were talking about. So, Mr. Speaker, we are aware of that, and we plan to pursue that option.
Now, member for Halifax Shabakto on your final supplementary.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll go back to the Minister of Natural Resources. What is very striking here is that we have an abundance of evidence that global climate change is going to have a direct negative impact on Nova Scotia, which is an entirely coastal province. Scientific studies and actual evidence both show the effects. When these events occur, there are calls, as the Minister said, for special payments to supplement private insurance coverage. I wonder if the Minister will tell this House how much he expects any government to have to pay out for these predictable and avoidable claims over the next decade.
Now, Minister of Service, Nova Scotia, Municipal Relations, Natural Resources.
I thought I had a change. That was quick. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I thank the member for the question. Mr. Speaker, I stand in my place to tell you that we try to influence as many things as we can through good policy and good governance. But one thing I'm not quite sure how the member expects me to respond to his question on climate change in relation to what might happen or what may happen. I can tell you, Mr. Speaker, and the members of this House that in my department and in the industry in Nova Scotia, in the forest industry, there are many, many things that are being done in forest sustainability and looking after the sustainability of all aspects of the forest that will, in fact, have a direct bearing, positive bearing, on the future climate changes in this country and around the world. And I'm very pleased to be associated with organizations like the Nova Scotia Forest Products Association and others who are working very, very hard to ensure that there are effective and positive changes in the climate as a result of their efforts in our forests in Nova Scotia.
Now, member for Clare.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister of Community Services. Today, Mr. Speaker, it was reported that the Minister of Community Services would not come out of the chamber yesterday to meet with striking RRSS workers. The reason given by the Minister was that he felt it would somehow interfere with the collective bargaining process. My question to the Minister, given that there is no collective bargaining occurring at this time, why does the Minister continue to hide behind it?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. It seems to me that we've perhaps spoken on this at least once or twice before over the past few weeks, but there is a collective bargaining process in place. The employer is RRSS. The employees are represented by the unions, and I am not a member to the collective bargaining process, and as best I can, I am trying to respect that process. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
You have a member for Clare on your first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we have a minister who fails to act responsibly by hiding behind the collective bargaining process. Right. Just imagine, a government that eliminated the collective bargaining process through Bill 68 and the Ground Ambulance Services Act, but now finds it convenient to use the bargaining process as an excuse to act. My question to the minister is, given this government's newfound respect for the collective bargaining process, will the minister please commit to contact the employer today to see how he can get both parties back to the bargaining table?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
I thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the member opposite for his acknowledgement of this government and my own attempts to try to be respectful of the process. I would tell you, Mr. Speaker, that I, through the department, have encouraged the employer to meet with the union, and I certainly hope that the union accepts that encouragement as well and sits down at the table with them.
Y'all member for Clare on your final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, last week this minister charged that RRSS workers are being paid a decent wage. Yet, we see this minister, through his provision of a budget to RRSS, view it as acceptable to pay replacement workers more than double what was being paid to regular staff. And my question to the minister, why is it acceptable for this government to pay replacement workers double, but not acceptable to provide the financial resources to pay our RRSS staff who make such a difference in the lives of our most vulnerable citizens to earn a decent wage?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think the member opposite gave his answer when he was giving this question, and of course the answer is we do not employ anybody in this. We fund RRS through per diems, and RRSS has a contingency plan in place, and they are working as best they can to try to care for the residents during this difficult period in labor negotiations. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Dartmouth North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Premier. The strike by care workers at the Regional Residential Services Society carries on without any willingness by this government to allow binding arbitration to take place. It seems as though arbitration is the only way to bring the two sides of this job action together and find a resolution to this situation. I ask the Premier, why won't you allow binding arbitration to be used to settle this dispute?
The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I refer that to the Minister responsible.
Community Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the member opposite for again allowing me to point out that substantial resources have been put into funding this sector. We recognize the importance of the service they provide to the residents. A proper program was put in place to recognize the training that was required to deliver this service, and a wage package was put in place that was commensurate with those expectations. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Now, Member Dartmouth North on your first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I certainly hope the Premier answers at least one of these supplementary questions. Mr. Speaker, this is a government that was so quick to use binding arbitration to settle the dispute with Georgia Moynihan, a 3P school operator. It seems no task is too difficult when a big business interest is involved. With lightning speed, matters are arbitrated and resolved. That willingness to show flexibility does not exist when vulnerable, mentally challenged individuals and their families. I ask the Premier, why does your government continue to put big business ahead of the well-being of our society's most vulnerable members?
The Honourable the Premier.
I refer that to the Minister responsible.
Community Services.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And again, to the member opposite, I would point out that the councillors were making an average wage of $16,000 a year just some 4 years or so ago. With an increase to $28,500, that's a 76% wage increase. Most people would think that over a 4-year period that was fairly significant. It was meant to bring them in line with the expectations that are made of them in delivering care to the residents. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Now, Member Dartmouth North on your final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I certainly hope the Premier answers the final supplementary. Mr. Speaker, the Ham government has used arbitration to resolve the issue at the casino. We shouldn't be surprised. They have demonstrated just how far they'll go to make the casino happy. I asked the Premier, once again, I asked you, the Premier, why is your government pitting families against workers instead of allowing the arbitration to be used to end this dispute?
Hear, hear. The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And this is a difficult situation for government. It is a very difficult situation for the workers, and I've had an opportunity to chat with a great number of them. And certainly, it is a great conundrum and problem and distressful situation for families and the residents that are being cared for. On the other hand, we have to look at the situation as it is, and this is a sector of workers that has received very, very significant increases because of the value that governments have placed on their services. On the other hand, at this point, our workers are being remunerated more than they are in New Brunswick, more than they are in Prince Edward Island. And the employer has put on the table an increase that maintains that kind of advantage over our sister provinces.
Gentleman member for Halifax-Shabocto.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. This question goes to the Minister of Environment. Mr. Speaker, excavation has now started on the Digby Neck quarry site. The company has submitted their project description for the Whites Point quarry and a proposed marine terminal. There is no longer any doubt in anyone's mind that we are talking about a mega quarry. In their project description, the company says it contemplates that quarrying could potentially take place on 300 acres. Last year, the Minister of Environment and Labour let this company get their foot in the door and refused to address the prospect of a mega quarry. Minister, a mega quarry will threaten this community. Given the latest developments, are you now prepared to stop the quarry?
The Honourable Minister of the Environment and Labour.
Mr. Speaker, the mega quarry has not yet come forth with an application. We have an application, as the honourable member is aware, for a very much smaller quarry than that.
The Honourable member for Halifax-Shabocto on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, the company has been very clear in its application to the federal government for its wharf what it has in mind. Mr. Speaker, the Provincial Department of Environment and Labour still has an opportunity to stop this quarry before it's too late. The company says they plan to ship 2 million tons of basalt rock a year. The quarry will last, they say, likely 50 years. The company is expected to make millions on a substance for which we have no royalties.
What do we get?
Meanwhile, the local fishing community will be driven under, ecotourism will suffer, the entire community will be put at risk. In response, the company has dangled a mere 30 jobs as community benefits. Mr. Speaker, the residents of Digby Neck, or some residents of Digby Neck, have come to the House today to seek justice. I would like to ask the Minister of Environment and Labour, can you tell the residents of Digby Neck what it will take for you to stop this quarry and save their community?
Honourable Minister of Environment and Labour.
Mr. Speaker, we have an application at the present time that makes that meets the parameters that we have set out for the establishment of a quarry of the size that the proponents are indicating they're going to put in place. And, Mr. Speaker, as long as they remain within those parameters, then there is nothing that we can do to stop them.
The honourable member for Halifax-Shabukta on your final supplementary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, if example will stiffen the minister's spine, let me point out to him that just the other day, the New Brunswick government stopped an Irving quarry proposal because it threatened the local community and the economy. There is no doubt that the mega quarry in Digby Neck will fundamentally alter the sustainability and natural landscape of this community. The company's project proposal makes that very clear. I wonder, Minister, will you meet with the residents who are here today after question period to discuss the latest developments on this issue? Minister?
The Honourable Minister of Environment and Labour.
Mr. Speaker, I cannot meet with these residents immediately after question period because I'm going to be occupied in the House with a couple of pieces of legislation of mine. But however, following that, yes, certainly I will meet with them. And Mr. Speaker, I would point out to the honourable member that what I'm saying is that when we receive an application, as he described it, for a mega quarry, then at that time we will have a different number of parameters, if I can use that word, in place in our consideration of the final destination of that quarry. If I'm seen to be speaking in riddles to the honourable member, it's simply because we do not have that application at the present time.
The honourable member for Glace Bay.
Mr. Speaker, my question is to the Minister of Education, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Tri-County District School Board has begun a new French immersion program at the Meadowfield School. Mr. Speaker, resources are already stretched to the limit, including bilingual teachers, to support 3 existing French immersion programs in the area at Yarmouth Central School, Plymouth School, and at Drumlin Heights School in Argyll as well. So my question to the Minister is, Mr. Speaker, will the Minister guarantee that the new French immersion program at Meadowfield School will not drain resources away from the 3 existing programs already in that area?
The honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the honourable member for the question and for the consideration of giving me notice that he was going to question me on the topic. Mr. Speaker, what I can say to the honourable member and to the House is that we, of course, are very concerned in the Department of Education that our programs are delivered and delivered properly throughout the province. We, of course, work with the school boards to ensure that they are able to do that. And with respect to this particular issue that he raises today, it is a matter that I would want to inquire of the school board, and will do so at the earliest possibility, and that will be tonight, to ensure that the concerns that the group have are in fact being addressed.
The honourable member for Glace Bay on your first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The duplication of a French immersion program in Yarmouth could possibly lead to a decline in enrollment at Central School. That would put that school's future in jeopardy, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, on page 25 of the Tory election blue book, there's a promise there that says it will protect schools in areas of declining enrollments from detrimental and untimely reductions. Mr. Speaker, some of the parents are here today to show their concerns that the school may close in the future. My question to the minister is, at what point is the minister prepared to fulfill that Blue Book election promise and step in to make sure that programs at Central School do not suffer and ensure the residents that Central School will not close?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
I want to thank the honourable member for the question, Mr. Speaker. We work every day at ensuring that we fulfill the commitments in the Blue Book, and we will continue to do that. And I can tell the honourable member that indeed, through the efforts of the member for Yarmouth, he has arranged for me to meet with the group that are visiting today, and I'm looking forward to that meeting immediately following the question period.
The honourable member for Glace Bay on your final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the minister received a letter last month from a group of parents outlining their concerns, but as yet, the minister has yet to send them a response. I'm pleased and happy that he's going to meet with them after question period today, because the parents have traveled here today from Yarmouth to meet with the Minister of Education. Definitely not a short trip, as we know, Mr. Speaker. So my final question to the minister is, the minister will agree then to meet with these parents after question period ends today? And also, when will the minister agree to meet with the school board to finally find a resolution for this problem, Mr. Speaker?
Now, Minister of Education.
Mr. Speaker, I'll repeat my answers previously. I've indicated that I will meet with the group following question period, and secondly, that I will be meeting with the school board this evening. Thank you.
The honourable member for Halifax Needham.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my question through you is to the Acting Minister of Health. Mr. Speaker, when Kim Conrad had gallbladder surgery, she was told by her physician that she'd received prescribed pain injections from home care providers. However, when Kim got home from the hospital, she was informed that the home care nurse would not be able to come due to the weather and that someone else would be replacing her. But nobody ever came, Mr. Speaker, and when the pain grew intolerable, Kim was forced to call an ambulance to return to the hospital and to get the medical attention she needed. Mr. Speaker, Kim's case is not an isolated case. Many home care recipients are reporting problems getting promised services. So I'd like to ask the Acting Minister of Health to explain just why is it that home care is in such bad shape in this province?
The Acting Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, I guess I have to disagree with the last statement she made that home care in this province is in bad shape, and I think that she probably doesn't really believe that. Unfortunately, I'll take her at face value in that particular case. If she wants to provide more details about that, we'd be pleased to look into it.
Now, member for Halifax Needham on your first supplementary.
Speaker, well, Mr. Speaker, when Kim returned to the hospital, it took 5 shots of Demerol to bring her pain under control. Her surgeon said if she had received these injections as she was supposed to, this would never have happened. So I want to ask the Acting Minister of Health, why are patients being sent home if home care cannot accommodate their needs?
The Acting Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, when people are discharged from the hospital in the case such as the honourable member is referring to, there is a discharge plan that is put in place before the person is released.
Now, member for Halifax Needham on your final supplementary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I would imagine that there isn't a member in this House who hasn't been approached because a constituent has been unable to get home care for themselves or a family member in these kinds of situations. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to table a letter received from another home care client. It states the client is eligible to receive home care, but, I quote, due to a current shortage of home support staff and your immediate care needs, I would suggest hiring private services on an interim basis. Now, Mr. Speaker, what use is it to qualify for home care services and then be told there's nobody to provide them, go find them yourself?
Now will the Acting Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, if that indeed is true, I would suggest that is very much the exception to the rule. This government has put considerable resources the past number of years into the whole continuing care sector. I think in the area of over $130 million, Mr. Speaker. And in most cases, most people are very, very satisfied with the services that they receive.
The honourable member for Cape Breton West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister of Environment and Labour. Mr. Speaker, in January 2002, James and Laurie Singer of 744 Highway 354 in Kennencook, Nova Scotia, were the victims of an oil spill on their property because a local contractor had a piece of machinery overturned and some diesel fuel went onto their property, causing well contamination and soil contamination. My question to the Minister is, can he confirm the guidelines for management of contaminated sites in Nova Scotia issued by his department are the regulatory processes that would have to be followed to clean up this site?
The honourable Minister of Environment and Labour.
Mr. Speaker, at first blush, yes, I believe that is so.
The honourable member for Cape Breton West on your first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I sent a copy of the diagram that was submitted to his department on this particular site, which clearly demonstrates the sites of contamination on the property, one being the well, one being the property near the highway, but also there's a swale going through this property which was not clean. The unfortunate part about this, Mr. Speaker, is the contractor who was responsible for cleaning this up removed contaminated soil and brought contaminated soil back to the site. Would the Minister please apprise members of the House as to why a contractor was allowed to remove contaminated soil and bring contaminated soil back when the whole object is to clean the place up?
The honourable Minister of Environment and Labour.
Mr. Speaker, I do not believe really that the department would have approved such a process, but however, I'll have to check and get a report for the honourable member.
The honourable member Cape Breton West on your final supplementary.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, one of the things that are required under these regulations that the Minister has referred to and must be followed is that a certificate of compliance must be issued at the end of the complete cleanup process. First of all, the property wasn't completely cleaned up, and that's noted in a letter by a department official, which I'll table for the Minister. And the department official issued this letter on November 26, 2002, Department of Environment official, Mr. Sandy Cameron, and I'll table that for the Minister. The concern is, Mr. Speaker, that the owners of this property still have sufficient contamination to be of a health concern. The Department of Environment and Labour are refusing to enforce this regulatory process and require the contractor, Russell White Contracting, to provide a certificate of compliance. My question to the Minister, will he instruct his staff to order the consulting organization on behalf of the individual contractor who contaminated this site to provide a certificate of compliance to ensure that this site is free of contamination?
The honourable Minister of Environment and Labour.
Mr. Speaker, what I can advise the honourable member is that I will get him a briefing note on this and advise him on what the current status is, and if indeed a certificate of compliance has not been issued, then it will be.
The honourable member for Cape Breton Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, recent media reports have pointed to the problems with the backlog of seniors waiting for nursing home and long-term care beds in Cape Breton. As many as 1,100 people are waiting for long-term care beds to open up so they can get the care they need. This backlog has existed for a long time, Speaker, but the financial assessment process to extract every cent from seniors to pay for their health care costs has just made it worse. So I want to ask the Acting Minister of Health, why is it the situation is being allowed to continue when seniors are waiting in their homes or in a hospital bed for necessary care?
The honourable Acting Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, with the introduction of the single entry access process over 2 years ago, the waiting lists up in Cape Breton area were reduced by about 75%. Currently, I understand there are about 60 people on the list, and assessment does take time. However, I want to point out one of the things that the members, particularly in that party, are always talking about are the assessment of assets. Indeed, there are, but don't forget that there are hotel costs in there, and about 80% of the people don't even pay their hotel costs. They're paid for by the government.
Member Cape Breton Centre on your first supplement.
Yeah. Is there a spa on that hotel, Mr. Speaker, the hotel cost? Well, Mr. Speaker, the DHA has been able to streamline the financial assessment portion of that process, but there's still a bigger problem. There's simply not enough long-term care beds. That's the problem. Nonprofit group in Dominion and the Nuwara Fort Maple Hill Manor, who I know the former minister had visited that on the occasion of their 25th anniversary in operation. He and I both attended there, Mr. Speaker. Have tried to open more beds, but have met with nothing but stumbling blocks and a moratorium on licensed beds. So I want to ask the Acting Minister of Health, as your department has studied this problem for years now, when will you lift the moratorium on new nursing home beds?
Honourable Acting Minister of Health.
I can say, Mr. Speaker, that within the Cape Breton District Health Authority, the department is now reviewing proposals for additional beds, whether they are new proposals or ones that have been submitted previously. And the Director of Continuing Care up there has been working closely with the district on that issue as well.
Member Cape Breton Centre on your final supplement.
Well, Mr. Speaker, it's good to know that they're finally starting to move on this, because it's a well-established fact that nobody's been able to open a subsidized nursing home bed for a number of years. Big corporations have no trouble getting approval to undertake huge construction projects and jack up their per diem rates by $48 a day. But charitable or not-for-profit organizations can't get a handful of much-needed nursing home beds. So I want to ask the Acting Minister again, how many more seniors have to go without care while your department continues to navel gaze instead of addressing the real problem of bed shortages in long-term care in Cape Breton?
The Honourable Acting Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, one of the things that this government has been founded on, and I think is been very successful, and the people respect that and will support us in the future, is making the right decisions for the right reasons. And as I said, there are ongoing discussions with officials of the Cape Breton District Health Authority, with the Division of Continuing Care of the Department of Health at this time, and appropriate will be decisions, and when the decisions are come, they're going to be based on evidence, not hearsay.
Now, Member Cape Breton Nova.
Mr. Speaker, I have a question to the Honourable Minister of Labour. I'd like to raise with him once again this report, the 390-page Dorsey report on workers' compensation that was filed with the government 14 months ago now, in March of 2002, and on which so far the government has taken one step last fall to legislate additional supplementary benefits. The Minister has invariably responded to questions on this matter by saying, "Don't worry, we'll take action in the fall." I'd like to ask the Minister through you, is that still the government's position on this report?
The Honourable Minister of the Environment and Labour.
Mr. Speaker, I'm delighted the Honourable Member has brought up the Dorsey report, because, as a matter of fact, I had a meeting this morning with the Chairman of the Board of the Workers' Compensation Board, that is, with regard to the Dorsey report and what actions the government will be undertaking. And, Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to advise the Honourable Member that, yes, indeed, we will be introducing legislation in the fall. We will be, I think, enacting, I think it was Mr. Richard, yeah, report, and I think that the Honourable Member will be pleasantly surprised to find that we're going to enact most of the recommendations of that report, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member Cape Breton Nova on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, they applaud, but I don't know if they're aware of the fact that the Nova Scotia government has had a response plan to the Dorsey report since July of last year. I have it right here in my hand, and will now table it since the Minister didn't. And it's headed the Nova Scotia Workers' Compensation Program Response Plan. government's response to the report of the Workers' Compensation Review Committee, Nova Scotia Environment and Labour, July 2002, and just to demonstrate how authentic this is, it has the name of the Honourable David Morse, Minister of Environment and Labour, right at the very top. Now that was almost a year ago. Will the Minister admit that this report, send him one, here, give one to the NDP as well, that this is indeed the government's response plan to the report that's been on the table now for almost a year, and if they're going to wait until the fall to carry that out, that's kind of a long wait.
No, Minister of the Environment and Labour.
Mr. Speaker, there's a difference between a response plan and the actual actions that are taking place to implement. We are now in the implementation stage.
Now, Member Cape Breton Nova, on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, I'm just going by memory. I think there were 54 recommendations for action in that report. If there were, one has been carried out so far in 1 year. Therefore, it would take 54 years to carry them all out at the rate this government is going. So I hope that they're proceeding from a plan to implementation, which has now taken almost a year, is not indicative of the general response that they intend to take to this matter. And any opportunities that I may get in the future to bring this matter up, I will, because it seems like the government needs a lot of prodding on this particular point. Thank you.
No, Minister of the Environment and Labour, I'm not sure. There's a question.
Well, no, I'm not going to tell him how many years I got left, but I'll advise the honourable member that before I hang up my spurs, I will have the Dorsey report implemented.
Now, a member for Halifax-Shabakto.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I also have a question for the Minister of Environment and Labour.
Please, all member for Halifax-Shabakto has the floor.
Thank you. To the Minister of Environment and Labour. Minister, I think it's appropriate to give credit to your government when it's appropriate, and in this instance, the government certainly has done well when it comes to solid waste issues. And one part of that, of course, is recycling of beverage containers. This is indeed one aspect in which it's very publicly visible. It's one that directly involves citizens. I wonder if the Minister will advise this House of his position with respect to the request of our recycling partners at recycling depots across the province for an adjustment in the beverage container handling fees based on the actual handling costs incurred by these small businesses. Thank you.
No, Minister of Environment and Labour.
Mr. Speaker, the honourable member for Halifax-Shabakto was so nice and gentle in his approach to this question that he had me deceived for a moment. But, however, getting back to recycling of bottles and cans and what have you, Mr. Speaker, I'm well aware of the problems that presently exist between the depots, the Enviro depots, and the Resource Recovery Fund Board. Mr. Speaker, it's my belief, and this board operates at arm's length, and it is a genuine arm's length from government, but it's my belief that the board has been cogitating an increase in the amount that it pays to the Enviro depots for each individual container. They've been doing that for some time, but I believe that they will be making an announcement regarding this matter in the very near future, and hopefully it's going to resolve the difficulties between the Enviro depot and the Resource Recovery Board.
Member Halifax-Shabakto on your first supplementary.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm wondering if the Minister is prepared to assist the parties. It's far from clear what mechanism would actually prevail in the absence of the Minister's intervention. And I'm wondering if the Minister will use his position to bring the Eastern Recyclers Association and the Resource Recovery Fund Board before a neutral third party who can consider all of the relevant facts and recommend what would be a fair allocation of the 5-cent portion of the deposit between those businesses and the Resource Recovery Fund Board. Can the Minister do that?
Now, Minister of Environment and Labour.
Mr. Speaker, I'm sure that if I did that on any other matter, that the honourable member would be incredibly upset that I was I was interfering with a board that had been set up deliberately at arm's length from government. So, no, I'm not prepared to do that, Mr. Speaker. But, however, I have had conversations with my deputy minister, and my deputy minister is aware of my concern, and I'm sure that in time that will filter down to the Resource Recovery Board.
Member for Halifax, Shabak, you have about 20 seconds on your final supplementary.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wonder if the minister has actually had the opportunity to study the details that the small businesses have put forward. One of the amazing facts is that what's really driving up their costs is the crippling costs of, you guessed it, their insurance for their vehicles, Mr. Minister. And I'm wondering if you've turned your mind to that aspect.
Order, please. Time has expired for question period. The honourable member for Halifax, Shabakto, on an introduction. Now, member Halifax, Shabakto on introduction.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Earlier in question period, I made reference to the presence in the gallery of some visitors who are here from Digby Neck. They represent an association called Partnership for the Sustainable Development of Digby Neck and Islands Society. I would like to draw the attention of the members of the House to those who are present in the East Gallery. There's Kemp Stanton, Marilyn Stanton, Carol Matub, Ashraf Matub, and Mark Dittrick. I would ask them to stand and receive the welcome of the members of the House. Thank you very much.
Again, we welcome our guests to the gallery today. Order, please. Orders of the day, or government business. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Speaker, would you please call the order of business public bills for second reading?
Public bills for second reading.
Speaker, would you please call Bill number 45, the Insurance Act?
Bill number 45, the Insurance Act. The Honourable Deputy Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I am pleased to move second reading of Bill number 45, an act to amend a bill to amend the Insurance Act. This government is committed to protecting consumers in Nova Scotia and ensuring some stability in the auto insurance market. As you know, rising insurance premiums are not just simply a Nova Scotia issue. They are a global issue, and we are taking a careful, considered, and well-planned approach to managing this issue for Nova Scotian drivers. Over the past year, Mr. Speaker, we have outlined our plan. We have released a discussion paper, and we have appointed a consumer advocate for auto insurance. We have kept an open door to the industry to discuss their concerns and have clearly indicated that we want to do all we can to maintaining a thriving, competitive marketplace here in Nova Scotia. We have taken steps to enhance awareness and understanding through the development of plain language brochures. We will continue to place a greater emphasis on education and prevention initiatives in an effort to stabilize costs and to reduce accidents on our roads. The insurance industry has been part of this process and has had an opportunity to present their concerns before the Utility and Review Board. We await the decision of the Utility Review Board, as it will help to inform the debate on the on the auto insurance market. We have indicated that we are seeking input from consumers, business, and the insurance industry on auto insurance reform. Yesterday, we moved to impose a cooling-off period for rate increases until the reform process comes to a conclusion. Bill 45 ensures that the discussion process occurs in a way that promotes informed debate and positive solution finding. We want a viable auto insurance system that is responsive to the needs of Nova Scotians in the future. The legislation prohibits auto insurance companies from raising their rates. The rate increase prohibition will stay in effect while the complex issues and concerns over auto insurance are resolved. No rates, Mr. Speaker, will be allowed to rise between May the 1st, 2003 and January 1, 2004. Any company who violates these new provisions on rates will affect significant penalties. Any company found guilty will face fines of up to $50,000 for each offense. And, Mr. Speaker, this is a very substantial increase from the previous maximum fine of $200. We will not allow Nova Scotia drivers to be treated unfairly, and we will not allow insurance companies continue to raise rates while a review is still underway. As I indicated in the House last week, we will be reporting on the results of our public consult on auto insurance later this spring. Final government approval and legal drafting would then be completed over the summer and a bill brought forward this fall. This bill, we will still be the government though. This bill will set out some fairness while we deal with the complex issues and concerns associated with auto insurance. It is difficult to carry on a reasoned debate while constantly looking over one's shoulder and waiting for the next increase to hit. This amendment will give us the power we need to introduce regulatory improvements in the future as part of a careful, well-planned approach to managing this global issue here in Nova Scotia. This government has been attentive to this issue and will continue to listen to consumers, business and industry over the next few months. We will stick to our action plan and we will develop a responsible solution for Nova Scotians. Mr. Speaker, in conclusion, I'm pleased to move second reading of Bill number 45, the Insurance Act.
The Honourable Member for Halifax, Fairview.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm surprised that that's all the minister has to say. You know, here we have an issue that is uppermost in Nova Scotians' mind. Almost everybody in Nova Scotia is getting hit with large and unjustified and unfair increases, and the minister can only find it within himself to speak for 2 or 3 minutes. He hasn't laid out what the problem is. He hasn't laid out why this is the solution. And I find it hard to believe, like my colleague from Sackville-Cobequid, who is providing a running commentary on the minister's remarks, as to whether the minister actually believes what he's saying, because it's so far from dealing with the issue that's facing Nova Scotians that I can't help but think that this government is detached from reality. So in the time that's available to me today, Mr. Speaker, what I'm going to do is lay out the problem. What is the problem that Nova Scotians are facing? We're going to talk about what's been happening over the last year and a half or 2 years that this issue has come to the forefront, and I'm going to talk about where are we now. And it will be clear by the end about just how deficient this bill is, Mr. Speaker, as a way of dealing with the real issues that are out there. But just to save the minister the suspense of waiting to the end of my remarks, I'm going to review with him from the beginning just how deficient this bill is. This bill will not save Nova Scotians from rate increases. Let's be very clear about that. It will not save Nova Scotians from rate increases. Not one single person who has been shocked when they open their renewal is going to be helped by this bill. Not one single person. And not only that, Mr. Speaker, but over the coming months, as people open their annual renewals, they will continue to see increased premiums, because this bill does not stop the implementation of rate increases that have already been filed with the Utility and Review Board. And that would apply to most of the insurers. The only thing that this bill will stop is new rate increases. That is, increases on top of the very substantial, one might say exorbitant, one might say usurious increases that Nova Scotians have faced already. So as somebody said yesterday, this is very much a case of putting a cheap padlock on the barn after the horse is so far down the road that you can't even see it anymore. Mr. Speaker, that's what this bill is. Let me review then how deficient this bill is. How deficient is this bill? Let me count the ways. First of all, this is not a rate freeze. at all as the government would like to have people believe. It's a rate delay. The rate increases filed to take effect after May 1st will take effect after January 1st, 2004. And any increases filed over the next, until the end of the year, will take effect January 1st, 2004. So the first point, Mr. Speaker, is that this bill is not a freeze, it's a delay. It's a delay. Like many other things that we see the government doing these days, it's a delay that will take them from where they are now till after the election. Just like on long-term care, just like on tuition fees, just like on so many issues, it will take them from now until then, where they don't actually have to do anything, where they don't actually have to understand the issue. In the true Tory tradition, this bill is all about what they can make people believe rather than what is in fact going on. Because what this government wants to make people believe is that they understand the issue and that they're actually going to do something constructive about it. But they're not. It's all about what they can make people believe. So there's the first point, Mr. Speaker. It's not a freeze, it's only a delay. Here's another point. The bill doesn't address in any way the problem of the so-called facility association, which is one newspaper columnist remarked the other day is sort of the perfect bureaucratic name for something which it sounds lovely, the facility association, but it's actually quite harsh and unfair. The facility association is the pool of insureds who cannot get insurance any other way. It's the last place to go. It's where all the drunk drivers are. It's where the people with the very worst driving records are. And it's where thousands of Nova Scotians, ordinary, decent, law-abiding Nova Scotians, have been put there because of the insurance industry's unfair underwriting rules. There's people like the young woman in my constituency who owns her own business, which she runs out of her home, and she bounced a check. Okay, she's not perfect. You know, sometimes it's difficult to juggle things, and something slides. And 1 month, her insurance check bounced. And because of that, nothing to do with her driving record, not one thing to do with whether she was any better or worse a driver than before. Because she bounced a check, she was put in facility association along with Nova Scotia's very worst drunk drivers. They're in there together, and you know what? They're paying the same rate. And as the statistics showed that we released last week, because we're doing our work on this, we're doing the digging, we're finding out what's really going on, the number of drivers in facility association has increased dramatically in the past couple of years. Dramatically. It's gone from a few hundreds to several thousand people. People who are put in that pool because they can't get insurance any other way. This bill will do nothing to assist the people who are in facility association. The section of the Insurance Act that's being amended does not apply to the facility association, and so the insurers are free to crank up their rates in the facility association yesterday, today, and tomorrow. In fact, another increase in facility association rates is going to kick in June, just next month. Another 33% on top of the already exorbitant rate being paid by those in the facility association. And you know, let's not be under any illusion here, Mr. Speaker. Some of the other people in the facility association are seniors. Seniors who their insurers have refused to cover anymore because of their age. And because they can't find a regular insurer to cover them, they have no choice but to go to the facility association. That's why the numbers are so high. It's not because Nova Scotians have become 6 times worse drivers than they were a couple of years ago, that we have 6 times as many drunk drivers in that pool. No, it's seniors who, because they had another birthday, have been pushed over the cliff into facility association. It's because of people like that young business owner in Fairview who bounced a check and has been pushed over the cliff into facility association. That's why the numbers are so high, and this bill does precisely nothing for them. The This delay in rate increases does not apply to many small, medium, and for that matter, large businesses, because a fleet of 5 or more vehicles is dealt with in a different section of the Insurance Act. So this rate delay, I'm not even going to credit it by calling it a rate freeze, because it's not. This rate delay will not assist those business owners who have a moderately sized fleet. As part of my work on the NDP Task Force on Auto Insurance, I've spoken to business owners who are saying this is getting close to the last straw. They cannot afford to pay the increases that they're being requested to pay. Many fleet owners have found that, in fact, there is no competition in the Nova Scotia market, that there is only one place that they can go. This is not something where there are 3 or 5 or 10 or 20 insurers competing for their business. If they're lucky, they can find one. And the rates are going through the roof for small business owners with a fleet. They can't afford them. And what's this bill going to do for them? Nothing. Doesn't apply to them. Is that an oversight? Did the minister just not realize that? If that's the case, we have a problem. Or does the minister realize that it doesn't apply to them and he goes ahead with a bill anyway? If that's the case, we still have a problem. Small business owners want to know what this minister and what this government is going to do for them. And the answer today with this bill is nothing. This delay in rate increases doesn't prevent insurance companies from asking drivers to agree to a higher rate as part of a renewal. As long as the insured agrees in writing, companies can still deviate from their filed rate schedule, because the only thing that's being delayed here, let's remember, is an increase in the rate schedule. This bill is like the Swiss cheese of legislation. I can't believe that the minister who introduced this actually understands how the insurance industry works, because there are so many ways around it. This is like the conservative version of the Maginot Line. I'm sure the minister remembers the Maginot Line, where the French built a defensive wall across the border between France and Germany and said, fine, there, we're safe, look. They can't get in. Well, of course, the Germans just went around it. That's what we have here, the Tory Maginot Line of insurance. Anybody who doesn't think that the insurers already have discovered dozens of ways through this bill doesn't know the industry. And then we have the spectacle of the Premier saying, I don't know if he believes this, maybe he does, that they expected a voluntary timeout from the insurance industry. That the only reason they felt it necessary to bring this forward was because the insurance industry weren't playing by the rules. Well, who does this government think they're dealing with? Do they think they're dealing with a bunch of Boy Scouts? A bunch of people who know the rules and understand the rules and have the best interests of Nova Scotia drivers at heart? Does the Premier really believe that? Or is that just the spin that his PR people told him to say because it was the only way it could justify the government's lack of action over the past couple of years? I don't know. We are not dealing with people who have the best interests of Nova Scotia drivers at heart. We're dealing with people working out of offices in London and Amsterdam and New York and other world financial capitals. They have one interest and one interest only, and that is delivering value to their shareholders. And you know what, Mr. Speaker? That's okay. That's what they're supposed to do. That's what the leadership of corporations are supposed to do. In some way, it's their duty is to increase and improve and maintain and enhance value to the shareholders. That's fine, but we have to remember that that's what they're there for. That's their job. That's what they wake up every morning trying to do, is increase the profits for their shareholders. The president of ING doesn't wake up in Amsterdam and say, how am I going to lower rates for Nova Scotia drivers today? He doesn't walk to his office saying, how can I make sure that we don't discriminate against Nova Scotia seniors today? No, Mr. Speaker, there's one question on that person's mind and one question only. How can I deliver value to my shareholders? And that president is going to do whatever it takes to deliver value to his shareholders. And we're kidding ourselves. The Premier's kidding ourselves. We're all kidding ourselves if we think that these multinational insurance companies think anything else. And the Premier says that he was disappointed because they didn't obey the rules. They didn't institute a voluntary timeout while the government was thinking about what to do. I mean, who do they think they're dealing with? Do you think the Insurance Bureau of Canada and their spokesperson here in Halifax wakes up saying, how are we going to deliver lower fare rates to Nova Scotians? No, Mr. Speaker, that's our job. That's what we do in the NDP. We say, how are we going to deliver lower fare rates to Nova Scotians? We wake up in the morning and we ask ourselves that question, and then we get to work. But the IBC doesn't. Don Forgeron doesn't. Let's remember that the IBC is a lobby group. The CEOs of the insurance companies are there to protect and enhance and maintain and develop shareholder value. And Don Forgeron and the IBC are there to protect them, to speak for them. They're not on our side. I hope the MLAs on that side know that. We discovered that. We know that. We realized that a long time ago. The IBC is not on our side. They're not on the side of our constituents. They're not on the side of my constituents, and they're not on the side of your constituents. They're a lobby group for multinational insurance companies. And so if you expect them to play by the rules, you'll be waiting for a long time. Now, here's another significant feature of the bill, another significant deficiency. And this is such a glaring omission, this is such a hole, that it's like having a chunk of Swiss cheese where the hole takes up the whole chunk so there's nothing left of the cheese. And that is that the only thing that's being delayed is an increase in the rate schedule. But in case the minister hadn't noticed, a very, very large part of the problem are the discriminatory rate categories. And there is nothing in this bill that deals with that problem. They can shift people around from one category to another, like they've been doing over the last couple of years. There's no change in the rate schedule. You just move, say, from category 7 up to category 15, which happens to have a premium a few $1,000s higher. The rate schedule hasn't changed, but your rate's gone up. And this bill does nothing to deal with that. Nothing. There's nothing there about it. You don't have to change the rate schedule to discriminate against people. And it's astonishing that the government doesn't seem to realize that. So let's suppose you have a 69-year-old in your constituency, and then they have a birthday and they tip over into age 70. Well, that person's insurance company might very well have an underwriting rule saying that they don't cover 70-year-olds, or they charge them a much higher premium. And so when the renewal comes in the mail, what happens? The rate goes up, sometimes way up. Sometimes they get a cancellation notice because they had another birthday. But the rate schedule hasn't changed. But what has changed is they've had another birthday, and so they've been tipped over into another rate category. Another thing the government doesn't seem to realize in the same vein is that you can be moved around different insurance companies under the same corporate conglomerate umbrella. Even though there's, I forget the exact number, it's something in the neighborhood of 29 individual insurance companies, or 32. there's only about 10 umbrella companies. Because what they do is set up subsidiaries under the same corporate umbrella, but they're technically separate companies. And you have the cream of the crop goes into one company and gets one rate. And then if you're a medium risk, you're in another company, and the high risk go in another company. And they're all technically separate insurance companies. But it's all under the same corporate umbrella, being directed by that same rapacious CEO who wakes up